In today's conversation, we discuss releasing identification to beliefs of stagnation. By this I mean the appearance or experiences of things not moving, or slow or little progress, which in moments that could be fine as all progress means change in your favor. Yet we also like to experience what we call quantum leaps as well, which we could also call radical progress or radical change in appearances or experiences. Now, there's a wonderful book called The Quantum Leap Strategy by Price Pritchett. Today, I'd like to discuss where it has been helpful for me alongside the psychology of suggestion. Because we're suggesting meaning to ourselves all day long, consciously or subconsciously, whether we are aware of it or not. Even if one is in denial or unaware of it, they are still suggesting meaning. For consciousness is the cause of the phenomena of their life experiences. We'll also explore suggestion through the 5 classes mentioned by William Walker Atkinson in his book, Suggestion and Autosuggestion. This helps bring awareness to what we are suggesting to ourselves in relation to appearances, revealing where one could hold themselves back from experiencing a quantum leap, essentially due to being overly identified with their current reality in a way that they feel imprisoned by it, when in actuality they're not. Because quantum leaps, when it comes down to it, can be initiated instantly, facilitated by a simple act of self-suggestion of already being in an ideal world now. So it's what one suggests to themselves in relation to appearances that is experienced as slow progress, no progress, or stagnation. The same is to be said about quantum leaps. So we could take a two-prong approach, because like with a lot of things in life, one way of doing things is not necessarily better than another. And here I found that taking a two-prong approach can make this easier and faster. So an example for this in practice for me, a quantum leap experience, would be in 2013. I felt that I wanted to experience a whole new way of life. I then suggested to myself, wouldn't it be nice if I book a one-way flight to Europe to see what happens? And this is the point of where the quantum leap happened. As quickly after an idea popped up in my mind, what if I sold everything or gave a whole bunch of things away, essentially reducing everything to some contents to fit into a backpack and head to Europe on a one-way ticket with an open mind for whatever happens next. I had that year transition from my IT business by transferring my clients to a few other businesses, some buyout deals, some earnout, some fee plus revenue share, etc. And from this, I had a clean business slate. So that way, I could go to Europe to see what I wanted to do next alongside some soul exploration. Then an idea popped up in my mind. What if I post a video on YouTube talking about what I did and what was in my backpack as I was leaving? And that was actually the first video for this channel, and it's still there. I'll link in the description to it. 10 years ago, June 11, 2013, my first official video on this channel, which the video ended up getting popular right away. So I was thinking maybe it would eventually lead to something. And I didn't know what, and here we are 10 years later, it led to something. So that simple suggestion of, wouldn't it be nice to book a one-way flight to Europe, changed my life radically, in an instant. That's the power of the quantum leap. And at any moment, you too can experience one if you like. Now, the book, The Quantum Leap Strategy, is written in an interesting way. The way it's written and how it describes the quantum leap actually shifts perspective radically to facilitate the quantum leap. Some of the chapters include ignore conventional approaches, suspend disbelief, and rely on unseen forces. And just by reading it once, it never fails for me. An idea pops up in mind which changes everything. And so, one simple suggestion accepted as true instantly transforms everything. You see, each moment we are suggesting to ourselves what everything means. Or we could say, as we discussed in Sunday's video, which I'll link to in the description, we are suggesting what everything means to us by our imagination. we are suggesting meaning to the five sensory appearances. And as long as we don't suggest something new, or we suggest the same thing, or we don't suggest anything and just stare at our appearances mindlessly, we risk it remaining the same or perpetuating the same subconscious beliefs in mind. That is because this world, which is made up of appearances, five sensory appearances, are representations of the contents of our subconscious mind pushed out. If we simply suspend disbelief in a moment and consciously suggest something totally different outside of, let's say, conventional ways of doing things, even if we don't know how it's going to work out, thus relying upon unseen forces, we instantly accept that suggestion, and that changes everything. And as a result, we experience a quantum leap, a radical change of mind, and thus a radical change of being, which includes then changes of life appearances, or we could say life experiences. And so you truly are the only suggester and suggestee in your mind. That's the Garden of Eden. And what you suggest to yourself is done for you as the appearances of life. That stated, no suggestion can be accepted unless the conscious aspect of mind allows the suggestion to be accepted into the subconscious aspect of mind, from which the unseen power of your mind takes that and externalizes it for you as the appearances of life. So you are life itself, and this world of appearances, which we could also call outer world, is a reflection of mind that is expressed for you by your unseen power. So what we're saying here is that all changes happen in consciousness. And one of the traps a person can fall into in consciousness that reflects as outer aspects of life that can be referred to as stagnation is the unconscious repetition in consciousness of the same suggestions. That is what we want to bring to conscious awareness, so we can release identification to those beliefs held to such a deep conviction that it became undesirably unconscious. Now, if we suggest something to ourselves that is radically different and accept that suggestion, it radically changes our consciousness and thus the experiences of our life. And that's the quantum leap. Making a quantum leap means moving outside of your mental boundaries. So what we're discussing here today is facilitating moving outside mental boundaries, which are only restrictive beliefs that exist nowhere but in mind. And how did we form these beliefs? Well, they started with a suggestion, or we could say thought or imaginal act. So again, you are life itself, beyond mind, and your subconscious beliefs create your reality, and they're formed by accepting suggestions. These beliefs can be identified with as applicable consciously, or held fixed to a light degree all the way up to a dogmatic conviction. And nevertheless of the degree, they can all be released if you want to. Now keep in consideration that many of our beliefs are helpful for our desired life experiences. The power of your subconscious mind projects them out as the desired experiences of life. What we're interested in here is facilitating a quantum leap, which releases identification to specific restrictive beliefs in the subconscious mind, and as a result alter many experiences in life, like what happened with me. So in William Walker Atkinson's book, Suggestion and Autosuggestion, he discusses 5 classes of suggestions to articulate the point of how suggestions form into beliefs. So let's explore them. First, we have suggestion of authority. He says, this form of suggestion manifests along the lines of impression and induction respectively. That is to say, suggestion by authority manifests both in the positive authoritative statements directed to the point and also by the spoken or written statements made by those who speak or write with an air of authority. It is a peculiarity of the human mind that it is inclined to listen with respect and credence to the words written or spoken of persons who assume the air of authority and knowledge. By the way, another good book to read on perceived authority is Influence the Psychology of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini, who also talks about this and other subconscious beliefs that a person operates from that influences their decisions whether they're helpful or not. So essentially, we may have once formed beliefs by listening to those who we would subconsciously label as authoritative. We may have listened to the words that they use or write, which includes subcommunication, and without questioning them, accepted those suggestions, which then orient us down a pathway that may or may not be helpful. And we can be aware of this via our intuition. Your intuition reveals meaning based on how you feel as you relate to the information. And from there, you can consciously choose what to accept as true or not true. So the key is being aware of what you are imagining in relation to what you consider a person of authority, or anyone for that matter, is communicating or subcommunicating. This reveals what you are suggesting to yourself. Always remember, you are the only suggester and suggestee inside. Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So you get to choose what you want to imagine, and that is what is done for you. Always read between the lines. And then we have suggestion of association. He says, this form of suggestion is one of the most common phases. It is found on all sides and at all times. The mental law of association makes it very easy for us to associate certain things with certain other things. And we will find that when one of these things is recalled, it will bring with it associated impressions. A perfect example would be a scent of a flower, which may suggest certain imaginal activity, perhaps a recollection of a past memory. It is the belief inside in relation to the scent that stimulates the imaginal acts accordingly. The same is to be said about words, sentences, and stories. So words have no power until we give them power by what we intend to ourselves in relation to them. This is why autosuggestion works so perfectly. We have meaning associated with words, and we suggest certain sentences to ourselves in a way that does not cause undesirable beliefs in mind to be triggered, causing unnecessary resistance. Instead, identification to those undesirable beliefs get released effortlessly through your conscious autosuggestions. The key is learning how to speak to yourself in a way that you listen to yourself and trust yourself using certain language patterns. And here's the empowering thing about this. You already know how to do this. You have your own language patterns which you can use that may go beyond what certain schools of persuasion label as language patterns. I explain how to do this in my Subconscious Mind program. I'll link in the description to it. And speaking of schools of persuasion, we can say that any school, whether it considers itself to be a school of persuasion or not, has components of persuasion incorporated in it, whether the teachers are aware of it or not. So now that we're discussing this, you'll be more aware of what you are suggesting to yourself in relation to information in any schools of thought you are involved with. And so closely related to this, we have suggestion of imitation. He says, this form of suggestion, while being in itself a distinct phase of suggestion, nevertheless has a close relationship with the several other forms of suggestion. In acceptance of suggestion of authority, there is to be found an unconscious imitation of the mental attitude of the person asserting the authority. In suggestion of association, there is an imitation of the associated thing. And in suggestion of repetition, there is to be found evidences of imitation. But still, suggestion of imitation forms a distinct phase of suggestion in itself. For example, philosophies, theories, schools of thought, and branches of religious denomination are accepted because they could be fashionable. And so what this means is we want to be aware of the trends and styles which can fluctuate. We've seen from bias from one extreme to another. Realize that although there could be a bias swing from one side to another, you can still take a more unbiased observer position to the different information by asking yourself a clarifying question. With this information, what and how is it related to how I truly desire to be? And then you could place the rest aside, perhaps to revisit at a certain point. Simply put, think for yourself. Education, philosophy, and whatever information is helpful. Yet we want to choose what we are suggesting to ourselves as we engage in these areas. This is the key. And then we have suggestion of habit. He says, the suggestive feature of suggestion of habit arises not from the nature of its original cause, but from the fact that the previous action or thought acts as a suggestion for the act or thought of the present. So this is where, as he says here, one may do things simply because they have done it before, notwithstanding the fact that the circumstance of the case have altered materially. They think thoughts and hold opinions simply because they have thought so in the past, although the circumstances may have altered materially. Now, the key here is simple inquiry. Are you operating from the past in relation to the now in a way that is not ideal? Or are you operating in a way now in relation to how you imagine yourself to be ideally, to form ideal habits, rather than perpetuating the habits from the past that are not helpful? For further elaboration, I recommend my video I released recently on operating in the now from the vision. I'll link in the description to it. So very closely related to this, we have suggestion of repetition. He says, this form of suggestion may seem to be very much akin to the preceding phase, suggestion of habit. But there is a marked distinction and difference. Suggestion of habit has its power imparted to it by the habitual repetition of the act or thought on the part of the individual. And so while suggestion of repetition then gains its power and force by the repetition of experiencing some outside information. A suggestion of moderate impression or penetrative power in the first instance gains force and power at each repetition, the constant dripping of water wearing away the stone. The suggestion, which passes you without much attention or consideration, when first made, will gain both attention and consideration from you if it be persisted sufficiently often and in the right manner. And so simply put, always remember, you are the only suggester and suggestee inside in relation to information that could seem suggestive. And so we see this on the internet, for example, AIDA based, as we used to say in sales. Attention, interest, desire, and action. As in a person's attention is stimulated by some information based on a belief identified with in their mind, and they may remain engaged with the information, building interest in it, whether it be related to what is ideal or not. The desire is stimulated in a certain way, where they imagine the fulfillment of the desire through a certain way of thinking, even if that certain way of thinking is not ideal in the long run, yet instantly gratifying in the short term, and then they accept that suggestion. To further this, he says, the whole matter is understood when one begins to understand the nature of the subconscious mind and the region of the memory. In these regions of the mind, there is preserved a mental record or impression of each thing that comes to the attention of the person. And these impression records are strengthened by each repetition of the thing. So simply put, we want to be aware of what we are suggesting to ourselves repeatedly in relation to information that shows up in our environments repeatedly for whatever the reason may be. And if it's not helpful to how you truly desire to be, suggest to yourself what it means ideally inside instead, as you are the only suggester and suggestee inside in relation to the information. So now this brings us to facilitating quantum leaps, which changes everything. Like with all of these 5 classes of suggestion, you were, are, and always shall be the only suggester and suggestee inside. Through these 5 classes, it is vividly clear what we could be suggesting inside, which could be encouraging stagnation-based beliefs. Then with this heightened degree of awareness, we know clearly what's going on. And so anytime, no matter what, regardless of the appearances, regardless of suggestions in relation to these 5 classes of suggestion, for whatever the reason may be that information shows up, anytime you could take the quantum leap, which changes it all, by asking yourself, what is the one bold thing that if I did right now, it would radically transform my entire world. The beauty is that you already know the answer. Then see yourself doing that, knowing that this one thing will initiate bringing everything you want. For me, I find it's a blend of fear and excitement because in this regard, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So what is it for you? You already know. Commit to it and watch the magic that occurs. You see, whenever you make a bold move, you call upon unseen forces to your aid. And upon connecting the dots looking backwards, you see how transformational these quantum leaps are. And here's another wonderful thing. Each time you take a quantum leap, you'll also notice your ability to be aware of these 5 classes of suggestions. If they're happening in an undesirable way, your ability to be aware of this increases. And you'll never find yourself experiencing stagnation again. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I'm aware of what I am suggesting to myself. And thus I go about each day accepting as true what I love. Inspiration shows up automatically to renew my mind radically, bringing me into exciting new worlds, all by accepting them as proof inside that I am truly the ideal person who I desire to be now. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.